Hey guys, you got Nick Berry here from Seed Terminator. We're here at our headquarters here in Lonsdale in Adelaide, and I just want to talk about something we've learnt over the last 10 years, which is really important these days because the cost of capacity on a combine harvester is really high now, and it's the idea of the capacity pyramid. So there's a lot of stuff that we can do and we've developed over this period on trying to reduce the amount of power that a mill uses to kill weeds. And that's really the top of the pyramid, the mill. And unfortunately, we can only reduce the amount of power based on how much material goes through it and what that material type is. So while we can change the performance of the mill in a certain degree, everything that happens before it makes much more of a difference. So that's why it's a pyramid. And it really starts at the bottom with the crop setup. So how the crop is set up before harvest has the most impact on how you're going to go killing weeds on the back of the harvester. And that's because the real problem areas are going to be when you end up with really green material. So getting the crop topping or desiccation down pat is critical, and where possible, windrowing makes a big difference as well. And windrowing also allows you to get a lot more weeds in the front, so it's a bit of a double whammy. But setting up the crop, absolutely critical. The next thing that makes the most difference is maintenance. And for the Terminator specifically, we need to make sure that the belt drive is able to transmit as much power as it possibly can, because if there's any issues there, then you're not going to be able to use all of the harvester's horsepower, and it's quite frustrating and ultimately leads to a lot of capacity loss. So in the early days, we did have belt drives that were a bit underpowered for the mill technology we had, and belt slip was a major thing. We've been lucky in later years and also have learnt a lot of lessons here, but the belt technology has completely changed. So any of the Smooth Feed 2 upgraded machines or any of the Pro platforms, they operate with Gates and OptiBelt's latest belt technology, which ultimately transmits so much more power. So 5 grooves in the old technology is now 3 with the new technology. So there's a huge amount more power being able to go through that. Having said that though, there's nothing like having fresh pulleys and fresh belts on to transmit power. If you have a worn pulley, you can lose 60 to 80% of the power transmission of that belt drive. And it's not as obvious as first look. Like, you just put your finger in there and you feel smooth. That's not really enough. It still can be worn enough and out of shape enough to lose a lot of power transmission. So that's really the second step in the pyramid, is making sure that you can transmit the power. The next step in the pyramid is the header setup or combine setup. So in my PhD, I actually measured chaff throughput with chaff carts behind combine harvesters. And one of the things that I picked up on is that I did a set of tests which compared just 2 different rotor speeds. It was 700 RPM and 960 RPM. And it actually made the 960 RPM produced 48% more chaff in wheat than the 700 RPM. And what that is literally just the straw is getting broken up, and on the sieve you end up with large broken up bits of straw. So there's a lot less straw going out the rotor and out the chopper, and it's falling on the sieve, going through the mill and being processed. The amount of power that a Terminator uses is proportional to the amount of chaff. So yes, there's a no load power, but after that, it's all proportional to the amount of chaff. And if you just change the rotor speed from 700 RPM to 960 in this particular case, that's 48% more chaff and 48% more processing power through the mill. Not only that, the rotor in the harvester is also working a hell of a lot harder, because it takes a lot of power to break that straw up into short chunks of straw. So you're using more power to turn the straw into chaff, and then you're using far more power in the Terminator, and the whole harvester slows down. So the capacity cost is huge. So we can do a lot of things up here, and we do, but this makes so much more difference. All you have to do is just wind the rotor speed up. Concave clearance makes a big difference. The threshing elements, there's a lot of things that can make the system more aggressive on the chaff and end up with too much shoe loading. Without a Terminator, yes, it matters shoe loading, but you don't have that massive capacity drain that's compounded. You've got the rotor extra power, you haven't got the Terminator extra power. So it's critical that we work on that. One of the things that we have also found though is as our belt technology has gotten better, that there's less slipping. So I think where we used to really have to focus on header setup in order to stop the slipping. We're not making as much adjustments these days. So I think that this is something that needs a renewed focus and a bit of experimentation and just trying to make sure. And really the way I look at it is that if you're dropping a windrow of straw and you haven't got any grain loss in there, you can slowly reduce how hard you're threshing it until you start to see some grain loss and then wind it back up a bit. You want to just do enough that you're not getting rotor loss. And then on the mill side, yes, we have some different mill options. We want to kill as many weeds as possible at Seed Terminator, so we'd like you to use as high a kill mill as possible. But in certain scenarios, we also are offering incrementally less power and less kill mill options, and that might be where you can't get the crop set up right. If you've got green weeds, then you need to use a more open mill that allows the green material to get through. If there's scenarios where the capacity cost is just too high and it's late in harvest, maybe the weeds have lodged a bit, then it's far better to kill a good proportion of the weeds than to kill nothing at all. This whole seed bank works like compound interest, so even if you get half the weeds every year, that compounds year on year. So it's like getting a 50% interest rate. So it's far better to put a bypass screen in and get half the weeds than it is to bypass altogether and get zero. So this is our capacity pyramid. Just recapping: crop setup, so making sure that the crop is as dry and as least amount of green weeds as possible, windrow if possible. That's going to give you the best material going through the harvester. Maintenance of the machine, making sure the pulleys aren't worn, the belts are fresh, the tensioners are freely moving. There's been a lot of issues over the years of tensioners just being jammed up on something or not moving under load. If they can't smoothly move under load, then you lose the ability to drive. So that's another one there, but getting the maintenance right. Then it's really about header setup and trying to get as the least amount of chaff on the sieve as you can while still getting the weed seeds and not having rotor loss. And then lastly, make a meal selection based on the situation that you've got, whether you've got big weed burdens, whether you're not getting them in the front, whether capacity is a real factor. But if you get these three right, then most of the season you can actually run high kill mills and it's not a big deal. Thanks very much.